Hey, FanboyNation.
This is your pal Daffy Duck, and you're watching.
You're watching.
We're watching. You're watching Fanboy.
Fanboy. Fanboy.
Fanboy.
Fanboy.
A fanboy, etc.
FanboyNation.
Dot. I assume Tom.
Today we are talking to Tilkin deFelice. I hope I'm pronouncing that as close as I can, about the new film that she's been a producer on called The Killer, which is now on Peacock. Lori, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Listen, I cannot complain. This is a wonderful film. Enjoyed the action sequences. There's a lot going on here. You have an incredible record of films that you've worked on, from Seven Brothers, Silent Night, obviously The Killer, which is what we're talking about now, you know, Appleseed, Ex Mechanica. So you've just been all over the place with the action genre itself.
Yes. Yes, I've been really fortunate to explore all these different platforms and how can we take John's brand, his style, and how can we explore that in comic books, in game apps, in anime, in feature film, in television. They're all such unique platforms, and they deserve a way to be featured. And it's been a fun ride.
You know, what was it about this particular story? Because I believe The Killer is a remake, is it not?
It is. It is. It is a remake. John, created this movie in 1989, and it was an homage to a French film, Le Samurai. And it's a very special film to a lot of people because it set the tone for action films to come. It inspired generations of directors and films after. It's very special. It was a very particular alchemy at that time that created that movie, and it just had not been seen before. That kind of blood opera and that kind of gun fu, that was a very first of its kind.
And why did it now feel the time, oh my God, almost 35 years later, to sit there and go, this is the time to remake this film?
Well, to be honest, we've been actually developing the movie for well over 15 years, if you can believe it. Some projects take a long time to kind of find their footing. When we started developing the project, we had it between the main characters were between two male characters, as the original was. And we had fits and starts, and we were working with different companies, and we were trying different versions, and we were trying some international directors and stars, and we were trying to find a way to retell the movie, honoring John's legacy, and yet contributing to something new, right? Contributing to film history now. It was probably several years ago, now 15 years ago, I believe, that the writer we were working with, Josh Campbell, and his writing partner, Matt Tilkin, came to us and said, what if we flipped this and we made the character a woman? At the time, there weren't a lot of movies even doing that at all. In fact, I think there was only one example, maybe, of a female-driven action film. And at this time, John was not even considering directing the movie. He's already done it, so why would he do it again? And I went to him and I said, could you imagine The Killer as a woman and what you could do with that movie? And he got really excited. And he said, now that is the film I want to direct. He said, now I see a reason I want to remake it. So we actually started this process many years back. And like I said, we kind of went through some fits and starts, as development always does. But we finally got our footing several years back, took the project to Universal, got Brian Helgeland on board to take us all the way, and then we got to cast these amazing actors and create a new version of The Killer.
Yeah, and it's exciting to see that you've created this new version. It's exciting that you've been able to make it what it is today, and a standalone project. Sometimes when they do a gender swap, it tarnishes the original character, but because it's been so long and it's a completely different take, that didn't happen in this instance.
No, and I think Nathalie did an incredible job of finding her own interpretation of that regal quality that Chow Yun-fat brings to his role. And I think what she did do and what John was able to bring out that is reminiscent of the original are these two characters and that code of honor and that code of brotherhood, if you will, and chivalry, which kind of harkens back to this archetype in Chinese literature called the knight errant, and it's this kind of anti-hero that's very specific to the DNA of China's culture and literary history. And he was able to kind of bring that forward with these two characters, creating a bond in a very different way, and yet still honor the original.
And now, correct me if I'm wrong, I might have misread this, but you were also part of the choreography team because of your dance background.
That's right. I work with a choreographer here in town. I brought her on board to create a really unique couple of scenes, specifically the one where Nathalie has to charm her opponent and not let him see her, start to think about taking pieces of her sword out of her dress and putting it together. And it was really fashioned into the choreography in a really unique way. Maybe one day we can release what the full video looks like, so you could actually see the entire choreography, but it's really cool. And it was a way, like I said, to mesmerize and not make it so obvious of what she was trying to do. And it was beautifully written in the script, and the choreographer, Seta Aibai, did an amazing job of putting that together and interpreting that through movement. And Nathalie did a brilliant job pulling it off. So it was really exciting.
See, as wonderful it is on Peacock, I'm still one of those physical media guys that wants those Blu-ray bonus features, and that what you're describing would have been incredible on a bonus feature.
Absolutely, yes, it would be. It would be. We got to find out. We got to poke Peacock to put that together for us.
There are people like me, tail end of Gen X, the older millennials, Gen X themselves, that love the physical media. Whether it comes to music and you pulling out either the vinyl itself, the cassette, or the CD, and you get to read the liner notes, or having the jewel case. It's like having a bookcase full of everything that you've read or you intend to read that you just spent money on that you haven't gotten to yet. And
Right.
Same with films. It's your own personal library that you get to see and display to the world as kind of your own artistic expression. How important was that for you as growing up and loving cinema? And how difficult is that now when we just sit there and we're just scrolling across the screen trying to figure out what we're going to watch next?
I completely agree with you. I'm also guilty. I love having my books, my comic books, my novels, my CDs, my DVDs in my bookcase, and they are. I mean, it feels like it defines who I am, right? It's my belief system, my thoughts, my artistic expression. I agree, and it is really hard today, especially as certain titles that you think, okay, well, you'll just download it, it'll be available. They aren't. They switch places and they disappear, and suddenly you think to yourself, did I really mean to get rid of all those DVDs? I think I needed them. I still need them. I can't even get some of these projects now. Not everything is available anymore. So yeah, I do miss it. I agree with you. Yes, it keeps things neat and tidy, but I am one of these people that love to have their cultural pieces of art, literature, like I said, e-figures. They're around my home. It makes a big difference.
Well, luckily, the beautiful thing with Peacock is that it's curated on there for you with The Killer, and their library goes back to what, I think the 1930s?
It's pretty incredible. And I think we're so lucky that we could find a home for this project with them. Like I said, it's a long time coming, and to find a studio that had the strong belief in the project and to see it take form and to say we want it to be out there and in the most modern sense available, it's pretty cool. We're very lucky, and we're very pleased.
What's it like for you after 15 years? I mean, this is essentially going through schooling again.
That's right.
Kindergarten through college. Here you are 15 years later, and now you have this final product. This is essentially an entire young person's existence. What's it like for you now to kind of let go? Does it almost feel like, oh my God, if we do a sequel, it's going to be like going into a doctorate program where we still have another 7 years to complete this?
Yeah, it's true. There's sort of like the John Woo School of Filmmaking that happened right through this whole process. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's 15 years plus, really. It's a long time to be working on a project and to see it through. I would love to see there be a sequel. I would love to see what we could do with the characters and the property and what the universe would be like post-killer. What does that actually mean for these characters? That would be cool. You know, when we created the video game Stranglehold, it was, you know, somewhat of a prequel to Hard Boiled. And so I would love to see what could we do it with film, but even in others, other platforms to take it beyond. I think that would be very exciting.
You know, you come from the gaming world, the comic book world, obviously I do as well. And when you translate it to live action, it's interesting because, you know, it's two totally different mediums. But when you're able to cross it over and do it justice in a new medium, how exciting is that for you as well as a creator? Because there are certain things like, we'll take Watchmen, for example, with Vertigo and DC Comics. That was one of the hardest books to translate into not only film, but I think this is the second animated adaptation that they're going for. So when you're able to make that crossover, like how exciting is that for you?
I mean, I would ask Neil Gaiman, right? I think he's probably a great example of how to take some incredible material and breathe life into it in another medium, right? I've always been a huge fan, huge collector of his comic books, and then get to see his works on screen. It's really unique, and I hope we can do something like that with The Killer, like I said, in some different platforms. But it does breathe new life. I mean, you still have to honor the medium it's going into. So you have to, you know, I know that can sometimes upset a fan if they feel like, hey, this is a little different than the original source material. But it needs to, you know, you have to still honor the medium that you're playing in. So it kind of opens up, you know, new ingredients to kind of throw in there, new tools in your sandbox, if you will.
You know, was there ever the temptation of trying to do a crossover, you know, like when they, with certain movies, how if it's a remake, they'll bring back some of the original cast from the first film and kind of like a wink to the original audience and going, see, we didn't forget about you. Was there ever that temptation? Or was it always the notion of this has to stand on its own, it has to be its own thing?
I think wanting to stand on its own, but I will say setting it in Paris was probably John's biggest love letter to French cinema, because the original movie being the inspiration for The Killer, being able to shoot this film entirely in Paris, obviously shot in Paris, that's the way to tie it for us, was it to tie it in. Wanting to kind of make sure the actors and the characters of this movie had their own exploration and their own path to follow, so they didn't feel that they were following in another, so not bringing in other characters. But I think the setting in and of itself, I think, is our biggest and most exciting tie-in.
There's a part of me that would have been like, tempted to film in China because they did it that scale city 1-for-1 of you know, of Paris, and I think they have one of London as well that would have been quite interesting to do to see.
True. Yeah, that would have been interesting.
Is there ever a temptation for something like that where you're just like, oh, we can just go film it in China because it's a 1-for-1 scale?
You know, we didn't think about China so much. We talked about some other locations that we thought, hey, we could efficiently shoot it here, and then maybe we go to Paris and we do 2 weeks there, and we can all just do the exteriors. But there is something that's not nearly as, you can't honor the city in the same way, right? It's just not the same thing. When you are there working with your crew that's from that city, and you're spending every day and every night and all weekends in that city, you become part of it. It becomes part of your product. It just definitely infuses a different quality than, say, you go shoot it in some, you know, in Detroit and then head over to Paris for 2 weeks. You know, it's just not the same thing. You can do it. You can get away with it. But I think in our case, it wasn't so much about what we could get away with. We just wanted to do the real thing.
Right. You know, because there's always that temptation, like Vancouver doubles for God knows how many cities in the United States.
That's right.
Toronto always doubles for San Francisco or Chicago. So there's always that aspect of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's always interesting to see the realism when you actually get to film in Paris versus, like how you said, spread it apart and then just do pickups or background shots in the city. The authenticity of this film is quite exciting. The cast is international,
Yes.
multilingual, and what I really like with what you did and with John's direction is that it just is. You know, this is something that's been going on, I'd say, for the last half decade to a decade, where it has to be hyper focused on ethnicity or religion or whatever it is. that the spotlight has to be on something that is kind of strange because it exists in society. You know, if you went to Paris, if you went to LA, if you went to Beirut, if you went to wherever, and that's just how it is. It's just people being
right.
people. But for some reason, it's become a major spotlight. And what I really enjoyed was that it wasn't a spotlight. It was just people existing, good or bad. And in this case, quite a few bad people.
That's right. No, and it's exciting too to be in a city like Paris. It's incredibly international. So to it's not a stretch to believe that you have a bad guy from Ireland or a bad guy from this part of the world, or or a good guy from over here, or an American singer here, or a British assassin there. It's Paris. Everything goes.
Was there a scene that you were excited for, and John was also excited for, that you really wanted in the film, but had to end up on the cutting room floor because it just didn't fit the narrative? I mean, the movie is almost 2 hours long, but every once in a while, you can't put all 4 hours that you really wanted in there in the final cut.
I would say no. I mean, it was shot very, very closely to what we had wanted to make originally going into Paris. I think the only thing that changed is with the writer's strike, and we had to take a pause and had to go back at a different point in time of weather, did affect a couple of action sequences and how we wanted to approach them, and that might have informed some new choices we needed. Other than say maybe an action sequence or two that we were hoping to do, everything else was really as planned. We went in with a plan and we stuck to the plan.
And then Saeed just decided to go full gray, so you had to wait for him to dye his hair. I get it. Yeah. Saeed's from Morocco. I know he's got a sense of humor because you have to if you're from Morocco. Every Moroccan I know has a sense of humor.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. As everything, the reaction from what I've seen has been quite positive. When, again, this 15-year trek to finally get this movie remade and in the manner that you wanted, that relief has to be there, but there also has to be a moment of now what? Like I mentioned, the graduation thing. All right, I spent all this time in school. Now what? What is that now what feeling for you after you've seen the final cut and have heard the reactions of the audience?
Look, I'm really proud of the movie, and I'm so happy for John, because I feel like I hope we did justice to creating a new product today in 2024 that has its roots in something so iconic in film history, right? Because The Killer takes its place in film history. So I'm hoping that people feel, as we do, that we've given something, given its own place. At the same time, I'm really excited to kind of take flight now, and explore a lot of projects that that have been sort of waiting in the wings, that have needed this project to kind of take off, so I can give some attention to some other things. So I'm excited, actually, and energized.
Well, I also saw in your bio that you learned one of the Chinese languages. Was it Mandarin or Cantonese?
Yes, Mandarin. Yeah, I have a background in Mandarin.
How fun is that when you get to eavesdrop on conversations where people will assume that you don't speak or even understand the language?
A lot of fun. A lot of fun. I spent a considerable amount of time in Asia. I lived in Taiwan for a year, and I lived a couple years in Beijing. And then, even during movies like Red Cliff, I went and spent 3 months over in Beijing. And it'd be a lot of fun because people wouldn't necessarily assume you could speak Mandarin. And then it's a very useful language, when you're traveling. If I don't speak the language of the country I'm in, I can source out a Chinese restaurant and I can go talk to some folks and get the information I need. Actually happened in Italy. Needed some bus change and some directions and some help, and I could not get help through the Italians. And I saw a Chinese restaurant, and I'm like, I'm gonna head over there. So yeah, it can be really helpful, very useful. But
The only thing that would make that story hilarious is if you went to the Chinese restaurant trying to use your Mandarin and they only spoke Italian.
yes, that would be great.
Well, you're enjoying what you're doing. You have a wonderful career. You also seem like somebody that likes being behind the scenes. I mean, you have so much going on that you could put yourself in the forefront. But, I think it seems like the excitement is on the production side rather than, being the face of the company or the organization.
Well, I find so much inspiration working with writers and being able to bring life to different projects. It's so exciting to me. That's where my passion comes from. So yeah, I mean that's where I want to be right now.
You know, when you were filming The Killer and you're in Paris, was there a certain bakery, a certain restaurant that you had to repeatedly go to because you just fell in love with whatever it was, whether it was the crepes or the baguette or, you know, probably far more adventurous of an eater than I am with escargot, whatever it was?
You know, not far from staying was this small restaurant, and the chef was really hoping to create a Michelin star for his restaurant. And it was like a new restaurant. I think it had only been open like 2 weeks before I had like discovered it. And I kept going back because he kept creating new menus, and I wanted to see what he was creating. And the food was so artful and so amazing. And I'm like, oh, Paris, this is amazing. So I hope he's made his Michelin star so far, but it was that level and it was very affordable because he was still sort of, you know, growing the business. So it was sort of this really exciting way to kind of be on his journey. So I went to eat there quite a bit, and then I started bringing friends there who started to, you know, also continue to go there. So really neat little spot. But yeah, that's the kind of place I would sort of source out is like, who's an up and coming chef and what do they got going on?
I didn't know the Michelin star was international, so I just learned something new about that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It was funny, like learning the history of the Michelin star and figuring out, oh, these are places that because you know the United States was a driving country before the train system. Well, we had the train system, but nowhere near as much as we wanted to push the automobiles, especially here in Southern California. We got rid of the red line for it, you know, to find out that Michelin Tire Company kind of pushed this forward was quite a bit of a history lesson.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what's fascinating the more that we learn about it. I mean, of course, you look at The Bear Today and these TV shows that really give you an awesome behind the scenes, but what it takes to get a star and how you, and I learned, especially when I was in Paris, like what you can do to lose a star, like the things that make you lose a star are ludicrous, you know, and the things they judge you on is more than just food. So it's a pretty interesting rating system, but a super fun thing to do is just to try to check out this sort of incredible cuisine around the world.
So we found your next documentary project.
Exactly. I know you're giving me ideas.
Yeah, I didn't know you could lose a star, so that's something on top of it.
And, yeah.
What was the shooting schedule like? Because I mean, you had the tight script, you knew exactly what you wanted, shot for shot as you went into it. Obviously, strikes happen, you know, political or otherwise, and we have, you know, various shutdowns here and there. So, you know, when you're finally able to get back up to it, is it full steam ahead? Do we ease back into this? How does that look for you from finishing the script to actual production?
Well, you know, I think the challenges there were so many challenges trying to come to get in what we needed. I mean, in France, the day is actually shorter than the Hollywood shooting day, so we kind of went in knowing we had a little bit less hours per day to shoot. And John always has a really ambitious appetite. He gets incredibly inspired putting together his shot list and knows we're not going to make that shot list. Like it's going to be a little bit longer than he wants. There's some wish list items in there, and if we can get to it, great. So there's always that daily sort of what are we going to get done? I mean, he's very smart. Obviously, we prioritize what needs to happen, but the goal is always like how much more can we get in to get to get John's vision into the shot, into the scene. So yeah, I mean, I think it was a challenge for sure, trying to get everything done we needed, and then with the strike, having to make some alterations on scenes. But we got it done. You know, we got it all in there, and I don't think we had to. There was nothing we had to suffer for it.
And then the frustration kicks in, and you're like, you know, if we had gone to Bucharest, we could have finished this a week and a half ago.
or made the movie a little longer, added another scene. Although, like you said, at 2 hours, maybe that would not have been a great idea. But I'm sure, you know, hey, at some point we could go somewhere else and shoot longer, but not really. You know, we wanted this to be Paris. So if Paris meant, you know, a little bit tighter shooting schedule, then that's the answer.
Well, listen, Apple TV just released, I think, the 3.5 near 4 hour cut of Napoleon. So if you want a director's cut, you can still pull it off.
Okay, perfect. I'm
Yeah.
gonna make a call.
Yeah. When it gets to the 4 hour mark, I think it turns into a limited series at that point.
Yes, I think you're right. I think you're
Yeah.
right.
And how do you avoid that pitfall? Because what does the first cut look like versus the final cut and what was released on Peacock? Was there an extra 20, 30 minutes, or was it really tight within like a 10-minute window?
No, there was definitely, definitely some time cut. I mean, because the first version is you're not really necessarily looking at like this has to be an hour and a half or 2 hours. You're sort of let's put together everything we love and shape it from there. So definitely there were some notes given to kind of how can we tighten this, how can we shorten, and that's when we ended up at the 2 hour mark, feeling like okay, this honors the story. It gives the actors all the room they needed to kind of breathe into these scenes and tell the story we need to tell. But I think you always know when you start, you have to start a little bit. It's going to go a little over to begin with, right? We always know there's going to be some wiggle room to cut. Um, but yeah, I mean, we may. I think John got what he wanted.
Well, I will tell you this, it did not feel like a 2 hour movie, you know.
Good.
So I hope that's considered a compliment where I
It's a
sit there and
big
it's like it,
compliment.
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, the pacing is important, right? Because you don't want it to feel the time that it is. And there are movies that are much shorter that the pacing may be off and you feel like, oh my God, it's 2 hours. How was this only an hour and a half? So yeah, I think it's at a good clip.
Which is something I always say about short films. If it's a really good short film, I want it to be longer. And if it's a really bad short film, 10 minutes feels like 10 hours. So, I
Right,
don't want a 2 hour
right.
film to feel like a 5 hour one.
No. Agreed.
When you finally got to see this final edit, the one that's on Peacock right now, how
Mm.
satisfied were you with it? Because as a filmmaker, whether on the production side, a producer or a writer or whatever, there's always that, oh, we could have tweaked this just a little bit. Oh, there's something right there I wish I would have done. Oh, we could have fixed her hair, whatever it is. You know,
Right.
was there something that kind of irked you that are like, ah, and like that you only noticed, nobody else noticed but you?
Um, I would say I won't spoil it for anybody because I'm gonna just not say it. But sure, I would say there was one or two scenes where like, oh, I wish, I wish. But then I talked to other folks, and you know what? They don't even see it. They don't think it. They disagree. It's good. You know what I mean? Like I know the material too well. I know why something was said, why a line was said, and oh no, we had to cut that line. Like that line meant everything to me for that scene. And then I talked to somebody like that. It's fine. But you just get so tied to those babies, right? And you just have to let it go because at the end of the day, you have to trust the bigger picture, the bigger story, and it always works. But yeah, of course, there's a few lines or a few moments that I would say, oh, I wish we could have that larger director's cut, and it was all in there.
I understand. I would normally ask fighters this question, but because you took 15 years to make this film, what
Yeah.
I ask a fighter is, after the weight cut and after this 12-week training camp that they went through to get to the fight, what is the one meal that they indulge in post-fight where they can relax for a little bit? So for you, what was that indulgent moment of it's completed, it's in the can, it's in Peacock's hand, now I can relax for 10 minutes?
Oh, actual meal, you mean?
Yeah, for you, like what was the actual indulgent moment?
Oh, that indulgent moment was um, a huge glass of wine and a big pizza. That was the indulgence.
Just got tired of the French food, I take it.
I just needed a change for just a half a minute. That's
I mean, you got to spice things up a little bit, and Italy's not
right.
too far away.
You have to be able to go back and appreciate, right? You can't have French food every day. Got to mix it up a little bit.
At least not here in the States.
But I will say I had some tremendously good pizza in France. So my indulgence would be truffle pizza for
Okay.
sure.
All right, so we'll stick with the truffle pizza as the indulgence. You know, the excitement that's there, the work that you're doing is always something that, has to be the driving force, because if you're just going through the motions, there's no excitement and the project almost feels like it's dead in the water. What
Right.
kept it going for those 15 years that convinced you this needs to be made and we're not giving up on it?
You know, we had different actors attached at different times that loved the project and sustained it for a little period of time. And then for different reasons, that would change. But whomever we were working with at the time, the different actors or financiers that came on the project, were so excited, so passionate for the project that they shared our feelings. And I knew we were on the right path, that the right ingredients were there. And it was just we just needed to kind of coalesce everything at the right time in the right place. So we never wanted to give up. But I would say definitely the various artists all involved, whether it was writers, actors, whomever, you know, we've always had people involved that were passionate for the project.
Well, the passion was there, the excitement was there. This was definitely a ride that we wanted to get on and enjoy with you as the filmmaker, and us from our perspective. We're really excited to see what you brought forth for us.
Thank you. I'm so glad. I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. If I didn't like it, I wouldn't be talking to you. I'd be like, yeah, we're going to pass on this interview because I'm one of those people that if I don't like a project, I won't review it because I know how hard everyone has worked to make this thing, that I don't
Right.
want to dump on anybody's work, you know, unless you had like $500 million to make it and 3 years and then we're like, this is what you gave us. But other than that, no, I'm not going to be that type.
I mean, when you see how hard these actors worked to learn that choreography and the stunt work, I mean, doing so many of their own stunts, I mean, it's so inspiring, right? It's just, there was never a moment to sit back and just be like, oh, let somebody else do it. I mean, these actors wanted to do absolutely anything and everything they could, and they did. So yeah, it's inspiring in and of itself, just watching them work.
Right. Or the lighting guy that missed his daughter's piano recital because he had to be on set, or whatever it
Totally.
is, you know, craft services person
Absolutely.
that missed mom's knee surgery, any of that, you know, we're throwing anything at random out there. But like, that's why if it's like something I don't enjoy and I know I can't say one nice thing about it, I'm like, we're going to hold off on this.
Oh, that's kind. Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah. Because there are people that would just go full fledged, no, I didn't like it, and go through the entire checklist of whatever. I'm like,
Right.
what's the point?
Brutal,
Yeah.
brutal.
Yeah. Like find at least one nice thing to say about it. You know?
Right.
But looking at your record, I don't see too many complaints with some of the films that you've worked with. So that's also a good thing, you know, batting you know, 700 average.
Thank you. I've been very lucky, you know, working for John and being able to play in all these different mediums and explore all these really incredible projects. It's been a dream come true.
You know, speaking of that, you know, I haven't had the chance to meet John, so I can't say one way or the other. But from you as a producer and as a colleague, you know, what was your initial introduction to John like, and how has that evolved over time?
Well, I was actually in graduate school when I heard of a job opening for a Mandarin speaking assistant. And I honestly didn't know John's work. I knew mainland filmmakers' work because of my studies. So I went to the local VHS store, and the one that was like had all the international products. It wasn't Blockbuster. It was sort of the independent video store, and I rented all these Hong Kong. I just went in and I said, "Look, I have a job interview with John Woo." And of course, the guy behind the counter was like, "Oh my God!" And I said, "Could you educate me really quickly? I need to know more about Hong Kong cinema. I need to know more about John Woo." And I mean, I just was blown away. I mean, I went home and I just watched movie after movie. My eyes were like, "Whoa!" I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how exciting the work was. And when I got the job, I sent that guy a signed poster by John. I'm just like, "Thank you so much for my Hong Kong film education." And I flew out for the job. I came out and interviewed with and got the job, and I got to meet John, and I had to change my thesis I was working on, that it had to be more incorporate John into the story. So I got to interview him right off the bat, and he was working on Broken Arrow at the time, so I kind of had to steal him away at a and just like, "Can I do I for some studies?" And it was really fun, and I got to learn so much more about him and his filmmaking style. And then I got to sort of grow up in the company in all these different roles, and continue to learn about how he makes movies and how he tells stories, and then what can I do to help share that in different mediums.
What would you tell a young writer that is overly married to the word on the page? Because the original Killer came out in 1989, which John wrote, and then the remake for 2024, he also wrote. And so how do you avoid that pitfall of being so married to the word on the page? And then you look at John and you're like, you just wrote an entirely different script from an entirely different perspective with similar attributes to the original story.
I think you walk into the production with a really sound plan, but you also have to be open to looking at who you're working with and what's happening in the scene and what location you're on. And maybe you need to incorporate that location differently, and that's going to inspire new action, which means you might need to even change a few lines. That happens, right? You have to be nimble and you have to be open to make those changes so that you can create magic. Because if you walk in and it's like, it's got to be like this and it's only this, and you're not taking into anything into account, it may not have that same magic. So I'd say you just have to kind of stay open and nimble to make changes.
I like that. Is there something from the trailer, since we've seen the trailer, so that's not a spoiler, that really just stands out in your mind, or like, this is what the movie epitomizes?
I would say seeing Nathalie in the nightclub with a sword, owning the room, tells you what you need to know about the movie.
I like it. Lori, it's Friday night. We're scrolling through, this is our new version of Blockbuster, just going through Peacock going, am I going to watch the rerun of, or the replay of WWE's WrestleMania from this year? Do I want an action flick? Do I want a silent movie from Universal's silent era? Or do I want something fresh and new? Why do we need to stop on The Killer?
We need to stop on The Killer because you're going to find a movie full of so much charm between two characters that are on absolute opposite sides of the spectrum, a cop and a killer joining forces in a city that is so romantic, with hyper real action and lots of doves, and it's going to make you smile. So I'd say that's a reason to stop and watch it.
I like it. Where can we find you on social media if we want to continue the conversation about The Killer?
Oh, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, but yeah, I'm on Instagram at Lori Tilkin, L Tilkin actually. I often go by my professional name, Lori Tilkin. So yeah, at L Tilkin.
Lori, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on The Killer, which is available now on Peacock. Hopefully, Universal will be nice enough for those of us that like the physical media that want all these extra bonus features on a Blu-ray at some point. I really appreciate it, and enjoy the weekend.
Thanks. I'm going to make a call for you right now about that. Have a great one.